Okay, so it looks like we've kind of slowed the growth of attendees, and so I think we can get started. Good morning, everybody. Thank you all for joining this webinar to learn more about the California Strategic Growth Council's request for proposals on the California Climate Investments, Technical Assistance, Partners Advancing Climate Equity, or PACE cohort program. Before we get started, I just want to say that I hope everybody is doing well today and above all, taking care of themselves. I want to recognize that folks are worried about finances, support systems, completely new ways of communicating, and the health of their friends and loved ones. So I really want to thank you all for your interest and commitment to moving this critical work forward, especially now. So getting back into the webinar, at this point, everyone should be muted, but if you're not, please take a moment to mute your own mic. We'll be recording the webinar and sharing the recording publicly. And so if it sounds like I'm talking like a robot, it's because I'm reading off a script. It just makes it easier for closed captioning and ADA compliance once we post the webinar online. If you have any questions during the webinar, please post them in the chat box rather than the question and answer section. That again makes it easier for us to respond and transcribe answers. My name is Kiran Kumar, and I am the program manager for a new team here at the Strategic Growth Council called the Community Assistance for Climate Equity team. Our team will be managing this project, and I will be the project lead on SGC's side. I'm also joined today by Coral Abbott and Sarah Risher, also on the CASE team here at SGC. Ina Lupin, who manages our TA program, will likely join for the question and answer section as well. We're excited to see so many interested parties today. I'm looking at the attendee list and we're just shy of 60 right now. Because everything our team does is around relationship building, and we think that a team approach to this RFP would be great, I encourage everyone to offer a quick hello and introduction in the chat box. Please also let us know either in the chat box or via email if you do not want us to share your contact information with those who registered for this webinar. So the webinar should be pretty straightforward. The goal of the presentation is to walk through parts of the RFP, clarify sections around the goals and vision of the program, and then answer questions that folks have. We have approximately 1 hour scheduled for the webinar, though the presentation is relatively brief, and with any luck, we'll be able to end early. I'll pause momentarily for you to review the agenda. Great. So the California Strategic Growth Council, or SGC, the mission is to coordinate and work collaboratively with public agencies, communities, and stakeholders to achieve sustainability, equity, economic prosperity, and quality of life for all Californians. SGC implements its mission through 4 core activities: investments, outreach and technical assistance, integrated policy and initiatives, and collaboration and coordination. The Community Assistance for Climate Equity team, or CASE, is a new team that has been formed at the Strategic Growth Council, which manages SGC's existing California Climate Investments Technical Assistance Program, as well as future capacity building initiatives to support under-resourced communities accessing state climate investment. The Partners Advancing Climate Equity program is a pilot program under this new team. We've dropped in a bit of a flowchart to help folks kind of understand how the PACE pilot program fits under this team and under the overall umbrella of the California Strategic Growth Council. The California Climate Investments Technical Assistance Program coordinates and aligns technical assistance resources to ensure that every community has the same opportunity to compete for the funding that is available to meet the state's greenhouse gas emissions reductions goals and advance local climate and environmental strategies. The Technical Assistance, or TA program, which was formalized in 2015 with an appropriation from the Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities program, has grown to oversee TA on nearly all SGC programs, as well as a number of other state agency CCI grant programs. The TA program has also evolved beyond providing TA only during the application process to include more upstream capacity building around project identification, visioning, engaging stakeholders, and identifying partners. In 2018, the California State Legislature passed SB 1072, which called for the creation of regional climate collaboratives program and the development of a technical assistance guideline for state agencies to use. The intent of SB 1072 is to further reduce barriers for under-resourced communities to access state climate investment and build the long-term capacity of communities to advance equitable climate solutions. The Regional Climate Collaboratives program would invest in collaboratives of cross-sector partners working in and across communities to provide local technical assistance support within their own communities on a more sustainable basis and serve as a convening body to help develop and implement a community's climate strategies over a long period of time. Collaboratives would provide training to stakeholders, support grant applications, develop climate action plans, and serve as an intermediary between communities and relevant agencies. The program, which is tailored to existing and developing collaboratives, does not yet have funding. In the interim, the Strategic Growth Council has developed the Partners Advancing Climate Equity cohort, recognizing that it is often individuals or individual organizations leading climate and equity efforts in under-resourced communities. The PACE program is funded, and it's funded through the Technical Assistance Program that already exists at the California Strategic Growth Council. It will serve as a pilot to both build the capacity of individual leaders across the state and inform the Strategic Growth Council's future capacity building and technical assistance programs. For purposes of this program, under-resourced communities are being interpreted as those that are disproportionately affected by environmental pollution, or are areas with concentrations of people that are of low income, high unemployment, low levels of home ownership, and other categories that you can find in section 39711 of the Health and Safety Code, as well as section 39713, subsection D, for a definition of low-income communities. The PACE program was originally developed through early discussions as SB 1072 was being developed and shortly after it was passed. The PACE program seeks to build upon successful climate leadership development programs run by nonprofits and philanthropy organizations across the country. Over the last several months, the Strategic Growth Council and the CASE team has held interviews with a number of different equity and climate community learning collaboratives to gain insights into what makes for an effective leadership development program. We're looking for teams of experts in these areas who can lend their expertise, experience, and skills to help us further develop and implement the program. While the PACE program will inform the Regional Climate Collaboratives program down the road and other capacity building programs at SGC, PACE is not a training program for eventual RCC coordinators. There's neither an expectation nor a requirement that the PACE participants participate in the Regional Climate Collaborative program. Jumping into the scope of work a bit, the PACE program will be implemented in two phases. The first phase of the program will involve the development and implementation of a collaborative learning cohort where participants will develop skills, networks, tools, and other resources to build their own capacity around addressing and implementing equitable climate solutions with partners. Central to the first phase is the development of community needs assessments by each participant. These needs assessments will help inform the state of local capacity building needs and guide implementation of the technical assistance in phase 2. The Strategic Growth Council is developing a separate funding mechanism to ensure participants receive funding to develop their needs assessments and receive travel support for participation in the cohort. And for that reason, bidders do not need to hold budget to support travel assistance or compensation for cohort participants. Phase 2 of the program will involve delivering place-based technical assistance to PACE participants and their networks of partners. PACE participants themselves can represent nonprofits, interest groups, local government, community institutions, and other local organizations. Their networks involve the partners they work with or have been trying to work with to move forward local climate, environmental, and equity-related solutions. At this time, we are expecting that approximately 10 participants in the PACE cohort would receive direct TA, including application assistance, convening support, trainings, and other TA. The remainder of participants would receive less hands-on support depending on the challenges and opportunities and readiness identified within their needs assessments. It is important to remember that the PACE program itself is a pilot program at the Strategic Growth Council, and therefore we are looking to learn about different forms and ways to implement technical assistance at the community scale that would most help advance capacity building. The Strategic Growth Council is looking for a contractor or a contractor team who can effectively develop the PACE cohort curriculum, implement the cohort leadership development program, and provide hands-on TA to under-resourced communities. As it is with everything that we try to do at the Strategic Growth Council, the PACE, or Partners Advancing Climate Equity cohort program, and by association the contractor team, should embody principles of social and race equity and be rooted in topics of environmental justice and community development. It is also important to us that the contractor team have a deep understanding of the state's California Climate Investments Program and experience engaging with the state on various programs across California communities. I've listed a handful of minimum qualifications here, though the full list can be found on page 24 of the request for proposals. The overall goals of the program are listed on page 6 of the RFP. In addition to the listed goals, here we encourage bidders to review the learning objectives listed under task 1.1 on page 7. Key goals that stand out to us for this program are creating effective spaces for peer-to-peer networking and learning, increasing the capacity of local community leaders and emerging leaders to provide technical assistance and support to their own communities to advance equitable climate solutions and grow long-term partnerships. Creating an effective feedback loop to inform state agencies and our partners on how to most effectively shape our program and lead with our technical assistance. Finally, providing near-term technical assistance to help catalyze local climate action and increasing participation in those efforts by historically marginalized populations. Throughout the RFP, you may see that we use the term collective impact quite a bit. To provide a definition, collective impact describes an intentional way of working together and sharing information for the purpose of solving a complex problem. Those who work on a collective impact model believe that the approach is more likely to solve complex problems than if a single nonprofit, individual, or local government agency were to approach the same problem on its own. It's another way to describe building and growing coalition work in a sector. The scope of work is broken up into 3 sections: Phase 1, Phase 2, and Task 3, which includes administrative and project management tasks. Among other topics in Phase 1, we are relying on bidders to use their experience and expertise to offer their suggested approaches on the following: elements of program curriculum, how to best develop an engaging curriculum to meet the learning objectives; program facilitation, how to implement a series of engaging workshops or convenings to carry the curriculum forward; program structure, how to best structure the cohort itself, the engagement amongst those participants, and the frequency of convenings to create a conducive and effective learning environment; program timeline, an appropriate length of time for curriculum development, onboarding participants, carrying out the cohort, and implementing TA in Phase 2. Outreach and engagement strategy, how to best engage with community leaders across the state to encourage participation in the cohort. I want to touch back on the program timeline piece. We suggest that Phase 1 and Phase 2 span approximately 6 to 9 months each. We recognize that many folks who would bid on this have experience developing and implementing cohort programs as well as TA programs of their own. And so we're really relying on your own expertise and experience to suggest what is an effective timeline for both those phases, as well as the lead in around curriculum development. In Phase 2 of the program, we are envisioning that the technical assistance provided will be adapted from the curriculum used in Phase 1. While the technical assistance in Phase 2 will be tailored to needs identified in the participants' needs assessments, we'd like to see how bidders propose to turn conceptual elements of the curriculum into action at the local level. For example, offering strategies for ways to structure trainings on climate adaptation, mitigation, and resilience, ways to support partnership development, or ways to advance anti-displacement practices locally. We'd also like to see approaches to maintaining peer-to-peer networks formed in Phase 1 beyond the length of the cohort itself. Task 3 involves program administration and management tasks, including developing an evaluation strategy to evaluate the effectiveness of the PACE curriculum and the cohort, as well as the degree to which phase 2 technical assistance has supported capacity building in the communities and amongst the partners that the TA works with. The contract amount shall not exceed $850,000, and the project timeline is just under 24 months, with an expected start date not likely to be much sooner than June 1. So this is a summary of the proposal components. For more complete information about what we're looking for, please see page 23 of the RFP. The proposal requirements are broken up as administrative requirements, technical requirements, and cost requirements. We are asking that bidders provide a breakdown of their budget justification. We're not providing guidance on how to split budget between the two phases, as we think our bidders have a deeper sense of the costs associated with meeting the objectives laid out for each phase in the RFP. We are expecting that the phase 2 implementation be robust and at least 6 months. We will appreciate bids with more detail on how various budget allocations across task areas will help the team most effectively meet the various program goals. I'm just checking the chat to see if anybody has any quick questions right now. Great. The evaluation criteria is listed starting on page 32 of the RFP. This is a secondary method RFP, simply meaning that the bids are scored based on a qualitative basis beyond simply cost effectiveness. In the evaluation criteria, which makes up 105 of the total 150 points, we have placed a lot of emphasis on the approach to the scope of work and the team's experience. The scoring for the team expands upon the minimum criteria, but is very much in line with what is found in the minimum criteria. And this is a continuation of the previous chart, which builds out more of our expectations and our scoring criteria around what we are looking for in a team or a proposer. You'll note also that we don't assign any points to each of the individual bullet points there, but rather are evaluating the team as a collective out of 45 points. The timeline is laid out on page 14 of the RFP. At this point, we are not expecting to extend the deadline for the RFP. We are aware of the challenges that the pandemic and stay-at-home orders have placed on folks, and will be as responsive to questions as we can be. Please let us know if an April 17th deadline means that you or your team will not be able to respond to this RFP. The reason for the relatively steadfast deadline is because we at the Strategic Growth Council have an encumbrance deadline of the end of the fiscal year for these funds. And so knowing that the Department of General Services is potentially impacted with a lot of additional contracts going through, we want to make sure that we're able to actually enter into this contract. But please, again, let us know if the deadline is causing a significant barrier for folks to respond to this RFP. We will plan to release the answers to questions we receive on this webinar no later than April 1. We will release all answers to questions received on April 14th. So at this time, I'd like to turn it over for questions that you may have. Please note that our contracting and legal folks are not here to join us today. And so there may be questions, or there may be answers to questions that we will not be able to provide right now, but we'll provide after the fact. We may also want to discuss some of the questions as a team and get back to you on other questions. And so please just be patient with us if we defer on some questions, but note that we will have answers for you for the questions posed today by at least April 1. If you have questions on the webinar or the RFP itself, please enter them into the chat box at this time, and then Coral and Sarah will facilitate the question and answer portion.
Hi, great. This is Coral Abbott from the Strategic Growth Council. We know there's been a couple issues with the chat box, so we're just gonna work our way through it. If you have any questions, please answer them or put them into the question box. And we can reply verbally and also type in responses that will be available to everyone. The first question we have is, how does this program align and is not duplicative with SGC's Boost program run by the Institute for Local Government?
Yeah, so I can take a stab at answering that question. So the Boost program is another technical assistance program that's run by the Institute for Local Government, or implemented by the Institute for Local Government under the California Climate Investments Technical Assistance Program. The Boost program is actually quite a bit of inspiration for this program in that it provides direct, tailored technical assistance to 10 communities across the state around their identified climate needs. The difference here and the way that we feel that it is not duplicative of that program is that the core function of the PACE program is the Partners Advancing Climate Equity cohort program, where we are looking to convene 20 to 25 partners across the state to come together for peer-to-peer networking and learning, to go through a kind of set curriculum to develop skills both around climate adaptation, resilience, mitigation, as well as softer skills is not the best term, but skills around collective impact strategies, coalition building, embedding equity into planning practices and things like that. You're right in that it does kind of look similar to the Boost program in that the second phase of the program does offer technical assistance tailored to community needs. I would say that it isn't duplicative, but it builds upon that model.
Great, thank you, Kieran. The next one we have is a little bit more of a logistical question. It's about us posting answers to questions by April 14th, but then having a due date a couple days later. So just to clarify on that point, these initial sets of questions that we've gotten so far and then today during this webinar will be posted within the week, and Kieran, correct me if I'm wrong, meaning within the next 7 days.
Yeah.
So there will be answers available sooner than April 14th. But any questions that we get past that point will be published with a deadline of April 14th for those final set of questions. The next question that we have here is, can you restate the expected durations for phase 1 and phase 2?
Yes, so like I had said earlier, we are not setting an exact number of months or kind of duration of each of the phases, because we think that folks with their different approaches to the scope of work will have naturally different needs in terms of the time length of those phases. We do think, though, that at minimum a 6-month facilitated cohort to provide some learning back up to the state in terms of what is working and what is not. And so to kind of restate that,
Hey, Kieran, your voice is kind of going in and out. I don't know if, I think others had a hard time hearing that. But I think
yep,
the main point there is just making sure that, well, I'll actually let you go ahead again. It sounds like we can hear you.
Yeah, sorry about that, folks. The work from home isn't being kind to my internet. What I just expressed was that we're thinking that at minimum phase 1 should be 6 months, and at minimum phase 2 should be 6 months. In the RFP, we state between 6 to 9 months for each of those phases. We're leaving it up for folks to determine exactly how long each of those phases are.
Great. And then our next question is, can you please review again the timing of the curriculum development and the needs assessment, which you might have touched on a little bit with that last answer, but is slightly different.
Yeah, of course. So the like I said, there's a minimum we're thinking for 6 months for each of the phases, but that also there should be time built in for developing the curriculum. The needs assessment, and I should say the curriculum development would come, of course, before the first phase of the program. The needs assessments would be happening during the cohort participants' participation in the cohort itself. And so the needs assessments would likely be kind of tasked to the cohort participants. There would be kind of a scope of work or a kind of action plan that's developed with each of the participants for the development of their needs assessment, and they would develop the needs assessments in between each of the cohort kind of convenings. And so the needs assessments would happen during phase 1.
Great. This is a great question. So our organization isn't a good fit as a lead applicant, but would be interested in joining a team. Any suggestion on how we could connect with those leading RFP responses? Very glad you asked that question. So we'll send around the list of all the attendees today, unless anyone does not want to be included in that follow-up email. But we also have a LinkedIn group for SGC for anyone interested in putting a team together for a bid. And we will also send around the link to that group where you can add a little more information about your organization and what you might be interested in to try and help facilitate some of that team building. Another kind of logistical question, are we looking to award multiple contracts or just one contract for this? So this RFP is only for a single contract, but again, we do encourage the team approach with the lead contractor and additional subcontractors to help fill out the total experience that is desired for this contract. The next question, what modifications, if any, do you anticipate will be attached to the program in light of the current climate, and what will almost certainly be a steep decline in local regional capacity in the months to come? Hard-hitting question.
Coral, I'm sorry, it cut out in the first part of it. Could you, I think I got the gist of it, but if you could just read it again.
Yeah. So what modifications, if any, do you anticipate will be attached to the program in light of the current climate? And what will almost certainly be a steep decline in local and regional capacity in the months to come?
Absolutely, and thanks for asking the question. It is something that we've been thinking about quite a bit across our programs, and then including with the PACE cohort. We agree that capacity constraints will really be brought to light in terms of kind of local recovery after the current pandemic. We are willing to work very closely with the contractor and contractor team to shape the program to most effectively meet the capacity needs of communities as well as the individual participants in the actual cohort itself. It's worth noting again that SGC is developing a payment structure to make sure that participants are compensated for their work and their participation in the cohort. And that's only one way of overcoming capacity barriers. At this point, really, we don't know exactly what the capacity barriers are going to be across California communities. But what I would say is that we are extremely flexible to working with the contractor to make sure that the cohort itself, as well as the TA, is most effectively tailored to meet those capacity needs and ensure participation in the program, as well as the fact that the program needs to be responsive to those community or to those capacity needs. I know it's not a super satisfying answer, but I think it's reflective of the fact that there's a lot of unanswered questions around the entire situation right now. It's unfortunate that the RFP is kind of going out during this period of uncertainty, but like I said, we're very open to working with the contractor to make sure that the program is flexible.
Great, thank you, Kieran. I know these are uncertain times, I'm sure for many of you as well, so we're kind of taking it day by day. The next question is related to the previous. We have a couple on this. The level of support needed by California communities varies greatly. Do you have target communities in mind, thinking of things like size, scale, and geography?
We do not. We've talked a bit about the kind of the term under-resourced and disadvantaged, and certainly would want to make sure that the program is targeted to and engages with folks who work in and or live in under-resourced and disadvantaged communities across California. But we also recognize that different communities across different geographies and different settings have different capacity needs as it relates to climate. And so we're actually really hoping that our bidders can provide us some kind of insights into the ways that they think the program could best be structured to meet the needs of various capacity building or various capacity needs across California communities. We have not set specific communities or geographies that we intend the program to work with, and so we're interested in folks' different approaches to engaging with under-resourced populations and under-resourced communities across California.
Yeah, and to clarify another question that's come through, the cohort is intended to be California-wide, though obviously we won't be able to touch on every community, but it won't be specific to a certain region.
Uh-oh. Coral, I lost you there.
Oh no, can you hear better now?
I can, yeah, I'm so sorry about this.
No. I know the work from home piece is, we're still working this out. Thanks everyone for bearing with us. Just that this is really intended to be California-wide and not looking at a specific region, to further clarify on another question that came through. So the next question that we have in the chat is there are many definitions of climate mitigation, resilience, and adaptation. What does SGC have in mind that provides clarity on that? Is the scope to address a range of urban to rural communities?
So I would say yes. I think we are certainly looking to make sure that the program is tailored to capacity building needs across different geographies and settings, including urban, rural, and suburban communities. I think better than me responding over the webinar kind of with my thoughts on this, I will include in the response a much clearer answer on what we mean by adaptation, mitigation, and resilience as it relates to capacity building in the Partners Advancing Climate Equity program. But to answer kind of the latter half of that question, yes, we are hoping that the program is responsive to climate needs and kind of catalyzing climate solutions across a variety of geographies and settings across California communities.
Great. So, sorry, just trying to catch up to the questions. To clarify, is the intent that the peer-to-peer learning and networking will extend from phase 1 into phase 2?
Yeah, I think it's included within one of the tasks, I think task 1.3 or 1.4 in phase 1, that we're looking for ways to support peer-to-peer networking and learning both during the duration of the cohort as well as after the cohort, making sure that folks are continuing to maintain their networks, either meet regularly or find ways to continue the networking and partnership building through the listening sessions that SGC has done to develop these programs and some of our technical assistance work. We've heard loud and clear that supporting additional peer-to-peer networking and peer-to-peer learning across different geographies and community settings is incredibly important for kind of establishing really effective strategies to combat climate across California. And I should say, we aren't necessarily looking for the peer-to-peer networking to last indefinitely, but we would hope that there's a strategy to make sure that the peer-to-peer learning and engagement does kind of self-sustain.
Wonderful. A couple of kind of logistical questions next. So if you, meaning the team here at SGC, like parts of separate proposals, would we consider partial/split funds or allow leads to co-create a new proposal? So I think that under state contracting rules, we do have to go with the contract that receives, or with the bid that receives the highest score. We're not able to kind of combine different proposals into one contract. Kieran or Sarah, if you know differently, please correct me, but I believe that's the case.
That is my understanding of the state's contracting process. However, we will bring this question to our contracting and legal team to see if there are ways to help facilitate development of these teams. But at this point, I would take Coral's response.
Same.
So another question, is the expectation for the cohort to meet in Sacramento during phase 1 for those kind of workshop sessions? That was
it is not
our...
Oh, please go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. I think that initially was was an intention that we had, although there is some language in there that allows flexibility for site visits and the like. I would say in light of the current situation, obviously everything around meeting in person is kind of an unknown at this point, so there might have to be adaptations made, but we haven't really thought through the details of that at this point. And then Kieran, did you want to add there?
Yeah, I would say that it is not a set in stone requirement that the cohort convenings happen in Sacramento. Part of our thinking that at least some of them would happen in Sacramento is because one of a primary goal for this program is to create a feedback loop with the state, both being SGC as well as other state agencies. And so we would hope to bring in different agencies and partners on their own CCI programs to network with and engage with cohort participants. And that's unfortunately most easily done in Sacramento. However, if proposers have suggestions on how to make the program really adaptive and kind of creative in terms of having offsites or to have convenings across the state, then by all means. I just wanted to provide some of the feedback and thinking there. And then to Coral's point about the current COVID-19 situation and kind of uncertainty over when we'll be kind of be back to regular convenings in person, it's a bit up in the air. And so we would certainly have flexibility around online meetings, phone calls, and other approaches to making sure that we're still able to meet the program goals and advance the curriculum goals.
Wonderful. Next question, can local public educational agencies be participants?
Yes.
Great. And then a follow-up here, can representatives from public community college districts be targeted participants?
Yes. So I should say that we have not put limitations on who can participate. I think it's important for us that participants are plugged into either a local community institution, and so that involves community colleges, that includes property business improvement districts, that includes school districts and other kind of community institutions and local government adjacent or simply local government institutions, as well as nonprofit organizations and those involved in interest groups and working on advocacy at the local level. Yeah, like I said, we aren't putting kind of clear restrictions on folks who can participate. Really, it's suited to folks who are working to catalyze climate solutions in their own community. And then also we've talked a lot about climate, but it's also important to be inclusive of and recognize the fact that folks who are often kind of strong agents of change in their own communities may not be plugged into the climate space directly. And so folks who are potentially working on different issues around workforce development, anti-displacement, educational attainment, healthcare delivery, things that may not on kind of first blush appear as climate related, but ones that many of us see very closely interlinked with climate, are certainly eligible as well to participate in the cohort itself.
Right, and then on the other side of things for bidders, can academic institutions like universities within California be bidders on this contract?
I believe so, but we will triple check with our legal and contracting team to get back to you. I know that there have been questions about how academic institutions, especially UCs and CSUs, contract with the state. And so we'll get back to you with answers on that. If you have follow-up questions specifically about your case, please send an email our way and we'll be sure to kind of work that out. That'll also help us with some context in terms of working with our legal and contracting folks.
Great. So a question that goes back to an earlier discussion we were having about whether the application can offer TA only in a specific region or if it has to be statewide. I do think that we'd want to make sure that there's competency to provide TA statewide. Again, the team approach can really help with this. Anything to add there, my team members?
No, that's great.
Wonderful. So next question, another kind of just technology issue. Somebody tried to download the RFP on Cal eProcure and it wouldn't let them register as a new user, so they couldn't access it. This is a problem that we've been seeing and have had ourselves at times. So we can work with the contracting team to see if they know whether there's an issue going on with that website, and then see whether we're able to just send it in PDF form or if there would be any issues with that. Hopefully we can just send it directly in a follow-up email.
Yeah, beyond the PDF of the RFP itself, there's a number of attachments that folks will need to respond to. So please send us a direct email if you are having trouble or your partners are having trouble accessing the Cal eProcure bidder site with the RFP and all of the various attachments, and we'll make sure that we get it to you as soon as possible.
Great. So a question about kind of what this contract's fit is within our other climate investment efforts at the state. Since this is a CCI program, is the ultimate purpose to give capacity to local disadvantaged communities to develop GHG reducing projects that will qualify for CCI program grants.
Sorry, Coral, you cut out a little bit at the end there. Can you repeat one more time?
Yeah, sorry about that. So since this is a CCI program, is the purpose of this contract to give capacity to disadvantaged communities to develop GHG reducing projects that will qualify for CCI grants, the California Climate Investment Grants?
I wouldn't say it's the end all be all goal, but it's certainly a primary goal to support under-resourced and disadvantaged communities to build capacity and create capacity building opportunities to identify local and potentially regional projects that would help to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in their own communities, and then down the road apply for them. There is no requirement that the bidder actually help and be successful in having a community apply for a CCI program. But with everything that we do under the California Climate Investments Technical Assistance Program, it really is in the vein of supporting communities to, and specifically under-resourced and disadvantaged communities, to develop projects and apply for CCI programs, as well as other sources of funding to address local climate, environment, and equity needs. I hope that's a helpful answer.
Yeah, a couple logistic questions again. Will the cohort be selected prior to the contractor being brought on? And how do you ensure equity is baked into the selection process for the PACE cohort?
Coral, I think I lost you there.
Oh,
can you hear me?
Yep. So the question is, will the cohort be selected prior to the contractor being brought on? And how do you ensure equity is baked into the selection process for the PACE cohort?
Thanks, Coral. So the first answer is no, that the cohort participants will not be selected prior to the contractor being brought on. In fact, we are hoping to work closely with the contractor and contract team to develop and finalize effective selection criteria to make sure that equity is built into that process to bring on the cohort participants. And so we're asking that bidders offer some suggestions and thoughts on how to most effectively shape and develop a cohort, and then we will work with them directly to develop and finalize selection criteria for cohort participants. Coral, do you feel that answers the question? I kind of lost you halfway through.
Yeah, I think it does. And please do let me know if I'm cutting out again. And whoever asked the question, please let us know if that didn't fully capture what you were asking. So next question is, you mentioned that cohort members will receive funds for travel. Should the contractor budget in other convening funds, such as facility rental and food?
Yes. So certainly the logistics involved in actually running any of the events and things like that, yes, they should. And if there's other additional pieces around materials and any kind of form of technology and some of those direct costs, yes, please bake those in. The funding mechanism that SGC is working on finalizing now is to make sure that participants themselves can be compensated for the development of their needs assessments and the travel. There's some contracting, subcontracting things that that would get into with the state, and so we're just working those out now. And so to answer the question is yes, please identify budget for kind of convening related costs as well as travel for the bidder themselves and the team. And then do not identify funding to compensate any of the participants for their travel or development of the needs assessment.
Great. Next question. These are really great questions. Appreciate all of these. How does this work align with AB 617 designated communities and transformative climate communities? Could there be synergies on this work, or is it meant to be separate?
I'm excited to actually put some time into responding to this question on paper and sharing it with everybody. But on first blush, absolutely there could be, and there absolutely should be synergies with various other similar programs across the state, including AB 617 and various TCC implementation, as well as potentially planning grantee communities. Many of these programs are built around collaborative stakeholder structures, around the idea of advancing collective impact strategies in communities around climate, and are working actively to build effective networks of community-based partners, resident serving organizations, as well as local government entities. And so we would certainly hope that the cohort itself, the curriculum that's developed, the participants in the cohort have there's some relevancy to those various initiatives across the state. It's also very possible that some of the under-resourced communities that end up that we get to work with through this program have never received or are not a 617 community or haven't received CCI funding kind of in this vein before. And so I think it will vary, but it's incredibly important that there are synergies with other state programs with the PACE cohort, because at the end of the day, we're hoping to build capacity amongst leaders in their own communities to continue to advance these solutions over the long term.
Wonderful. And folks, just know that if I'm not getting to your question, we are running low on time. So we might not make it through all of them, but like I said earlier, or like Kieran said earlier, we will be fully answering these questions and sending them all around. So you will get your answer. Apologies if we don't make it through it. This question gets a little bit more at some of the dynamics that can exist in communities, building off of some experiences maybe with other programs.
Well, just a heads up, if you're asking a question, my audio cut out.
Okay, is it better now?
Yes.
Okay.
I think it sometimes just needs to be refreshed.
Okay. And again, we'll have these all in a written form too, if you're not able to catch what we're saying. So somebody asked, in our experience doing this work illuminates places in community that need healing. Folks who have been excluded socioeconomically for sometimes generations have to process hurt, distrust of local government, poverty, violence, etc. Is there room to allow for these emergent conversations to take place within the scope of this project? We don't want to stir things up without knowing we can support a healing process.
Absolutely. So in our conversations with folks to help us kind of inform this program, it's become very clear to us that, and I think we all know that there is healing that needs to be done. There's quite a bit of distrust between community partners, residents, and folks who are doing this work in community, and kind of local governments, as well as state government. And so I think it's incredibly important that we are open to kind of those pieces of capacity, leadership development, personal ecology, things like that as part of something like a leadership development cohort. I don't love the term leadership development because it's kind of not on us to develop leadership or even develop capacity, but to create opportunities for leadership development and capacity building. And I think elements of healing and kind of introspection, as well as collective healing, are incredibly important in these spaces. So thank you for bringing up the question. And I absolutely do not think it is stirring the pot. In fact, it's creating sustainability of those working in these spaces over the long term. So we would certainly be open to some of those elements within the curriculum as part of the cohort.
Wonderful. A question about participants on this call. If we're interested in forming a team with diverse regional expertise, is it possible to include the geographic region of people on this call when you send out the contact information? So certainly if folks feel comfortable with that, please let us know through email or this question box what specific geographies that you work in, if any. I know some of you are statewide organizations, but we'd be happy to include that. A question about CCI funding. Since this is CCI funding, are we required to use CalEnviroscreen and the low income designation in selecting participants, or can we use other measures and tools of climate and social vulnerability?
So my answer to that is yes. There will be flexibility in terms of developing the selection criteria, and I think it's really important to use other determinations of social and physical vulnerability beyond Cal EnviroScreen. This funding does come from the California Climate Investments, and so we would want to make sure that at least a portion of the participants and the communities that are served certainly kind of fall within Cal EnviroScreen, and I don't think that would be such a reach or very difficult with this kind of work. But I think it's also important to look at other indicators of vulnerability and disadvantage, and so other ones out there include the well, I'm blanking on the name now, but I will include some of the other indicators that the California Department of Public Health have been pulling together to illuminate some of those other areas of disadvantage across California as ways to kind of inform this thinking around under-resourced and disadvantaged communities, and then eventually selection criteria for the participants in the cohort itself.
Wonderful. Now with just a minute left, we've gotten several questions about Cal eProcure. So we can try to provide a little guidance maybe and follow up on how to best access Cal eProcure when we follow up with our contracts team and see if there are any kind of pre-made guides on how to better access the site. I know it's a little confusing, so we can follow up on that. Please continue to send in your questions. You can email us directly as well. We will be sharing the PowerPoint, the recording of the webinar on our website. We should have that up hopefully next week. And we'll also be providing all of these questions and answers in a written format on April 1st. And Kieran just added his contact information to the screen being shared now. So jot down phone number and email if you'd like to get in touch. Thank you everyone for joining today. We really appreciate the interest and the good turnout. We are looking forward to seeing your proposals. Thanks so much.
Yes, thank you everybody, and please do continue to send us your questions and we'll try to be as responsive as possible. We'll be getting out a first draft or a first set of questions and answers by April 1st, and then also by the April 14th deadline that we had set for ourselves. Thank you again, and I hope everybody stays well.